Trillionaire CEO made a bet and ended up falling for a waitress. Before we dive into this captivating story, we invite you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support our work. We hope you enjoy it. Amid the constant hum of New York City, where skyscrapers seem to pierce the clouds and the rush of life set the rhythm of the streets, there is a striking contrast tucked away in the city's less glamorous corners. In one of those hidden spots stood a small corner bar, a cozy refuge bathed in warm light and aged wood, where time seemed to slow and worries stayed outside the door for a while. It was there that Hannah Morgan split her days between serving customers and caring for her ailing mother at home. Her life was a constant balancing act, keeping up with the bills while keeping hope alive. With every tray she balanced, and every smile she offered even during the most exhausting shifts, she revealed a quiet strength that defied adversity. Her eyes, always shining with determination, reflected the spirit of someone who had learned to survive the unexpected, even when fate seemed to treat her efforts with indifference. Far above, among the gleaming glass towers that dominated the city's skyline, Benjamin Crawford commanded the movements of a financial empire whose influence stretched across the country and beyond. Navigating paths paved with astronomical figures and decisions that moved markets, he had achieved the remarkable feat of becoming the youngest trillionaire in the United States. Yet behind the colossal numbers and the commanding presence he naturally projected, there was a man whose soul, in many ways, was restless. The unquestionable success no longer filled him as it once had. The constant applause from boardrooms sounded like distant echoes of an incomplete fulfillment. More and more, Benjamin realized that the life he had meticulously crafted to reach the top might have overlooked what truly mattered once he got there. One evening, seemingly destined to follow the same predictable script as so many others, one of his few real friends, tired of galas and predictable meetings among magnates, threw him a casual but provocative challenge. "I bet you couldn't spend a night at one of those neighborhood bars without getting recognized and actually have a good time." To Benjamin's ears, it sounded like a curious provocation, and he decided to accept it, not so much for the challenge itself, but out of a genuine desire to escape, if only for one night, the glass bubble his life had become. And so, Benjamin and Hannah's paths crossed. When he pushed open the bar's door, he felt an immediate change in the air. The warm lighting and the comforting scent of aged wood created a setting far removed from the cold, calculated spaces he usually inhabited. His eyes were quickly drawn to Hannah, who moved gracefully through the room, balancing drinks and offering genuine smiles. She lacked the pretense he so often encountered in business meetings and social events. Instead, there was an authenticity about her that disarmed him the moment he saw her, a quiet energy that captured everyone's attention without any effort. Hannah, accustomed to all sorts of customers, noticed him quickly but maintained her professional composure. Though he tried to keep a low profile, Benjamin carried an aura that was impossible to ignore. Still, to her, he was just another face among many, or at least that was what she tried to convince herself. However, the moment their eyes met, something beyond the routine of service passed between them. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to plant a seed of mutual curiosity. When Benjamin left the bar that night, he carried with him an unexpected restlessness. It was rare for anything beyond numbers or business to occupy his mind for long. Yet that waitress, with her tangible determination and resilient sparkle in her eyes, had left a mark he couldn't explain. As Hannah closed the bar later that night, she caught herself thinking about the elegant stranger whose gaze seemed to cut through the exhaustion of her day and see something deeper beneath the surface. Without realizing it, their lives so distant in context, had begun to intertwine in a story that would challenge everything they thought they knew. In the days that followed that unusual night, Hannah stuck to her usual discipline, focusing on the endless demands of work and the constant needs of her mother at home. Each shift at the bar felt like a marathon, with time slipping through her fingers as she tried to keep everything in order. Yet no matter how much she threw herself into her familiar routines, the memory of that distinctive customer kept slipping through the cracks at the most unexpected moments. It was as if, in the midst of her daily tasks, his image found small openings to settle in, lingering like a stubborn shadow she couldn't quite shake. Benjamin, on the other hand, despite the relentless flood of responsibilities competing for his attention, couldn't push the image of Hannah out of his mind. No matter how deeply he immersed himself in billion-dollar contracts or strategic meetings, there was always a space reserved for that persistent and strangely intriguing memory that defied the cold logic that usually ruled his days. It was strange to admit, but there was something about that woman that disrupted the predictable cycle of his routine, like an unexpected note in a symphony he thought he already knew by heart. She represented a genuine pause amid the endless social performances that had long filled his life. Driven by a feeling he could no longer ignore, Benjamin decided to return to the bar. This time he went alone. He wasn't looking to draw attention or cause a scene. He chose a table tucked away in a quiet corner, from where he could observe not just the surroundings, but most importantly, Hannah. She was there, as usual, moving through her work with the same efficiency he had admired from the start. Her gestures were natural, free of any pretense. Every movement seemed to come from a simple need to get the job done, and because of that, carried a beauty that captivated him more than he cared to admit. Hannah noticed his presence almost immediately, but kept her professionalism intact. She was used to dealing with curious glances and unwanted attention, and she wasn't about to make an exception, even though something inside her wavered for a brief moment when she recognized him. Beneath her carefully maintained neutrality, there was a silent surprise. Why would a man so clearly out of place in her everyday world come back here? And why was it so hard for her, who had always been so good at maintaining a safe distance from customers, to brush off the feeling of restlessness he stirred? As the evening wore on, small interactions began to stack up between them. Nothing anyone else would find noteworthy, but enough to weave a subtle web of connection. Brief exchanges of glances, almost imperceptible gestures of acknowledgement, and a growing familiarity that seemed to build quietly in the spaces between words left unsaid. Benjamin understood that here, unlike the corporate world where he easily commanded attention, he would need something more than charm or resources. He would need patience and a deep respect for the natural rhythm Hannah set for her own world. When the night finally came to a close and he left the bar, he did so with the same discretion he had arrived with. Hannah, watching him go, felt a strange mix of relief and lingering curiosity. There was something about his steady presence, something that disrupted the predictable melodies of her routine. And as the lights of the bar dimmed one by one, both carried back to their separate lives a cluster of thoughts that refused to be silenced. Thoughts that, little by little, would push them inexorably toward a destiny far beyond any bet or coincidence. As the days passed, Benjamin's presence at the bar shifted from a surprising occurrence to a silent constant, as familiar as the warm yellow lights hanging above the wooden counter or the clinking of glasses washed at the end of each shift. He blended into the atmosphere with a quiet naturalness, never overstepping, never trying to impose himself the way he often did in boardrooms. On the contrary, Benjamin seemed to understand that, in that space, Power didn't come from the title he carried, but from the authenticity of simple gestures. He observed every detail, every daily interaction happening around him, as if he were collecting small fragments of a life completely foreign to him until then. Hannah, for her part, continued her routine with her usual focus, though deep down she couldn't help but notice how often that special customer appeared. There was something about him that challenged her usual defenses, not because he was intrusive, but precisely because he wasn't. Benjamin maintained a respectful distance, never looking for easy shortcuts to win her attention. He seemed more interested in understanding her world than in changing it. This silent respect for the cadence of her life began to disarm her in subtle ways, slipping gently through the cracks of her carefully built walls like an unexpected breeze. The everyday rhythm of the bar naturally created opportunities for small conversations to spring up between them. Quick comments about the day's crowd, casual remarks about the city's unpredictable weather, or brief exchanges about coffee or music preferences. In those short interactions, Hannah began to see beyond the surface of the successful businessman. She saw a man capable of truly listening, someone who didn't speak with the habitual arrogance of those used to being obeyed, but with genuine curiosity and sincere respect for the person standing before him. Determined to understand the reasons behind Benjamin's almost ritual presence at her workplace, Hannah started to observe him more closely, not as someone assessing a threat, but as someone reading between the lines, looking for signs of authenticity. With every small gesture, she realized he wasn't there to impress her, much less to try to reshape her choices. Benjamin simply wanted to be present, as if that humble space offered him something his luxurious offices and strategic meetings never could: a rare sense of belonging. Benjamin, fully aware that any hasty move could jeopardize the delicate construction he was building, cherished every tiny victory in their growing connection. A fleeting smile from Hannah during a busy shift, a warmer-than-expected reply, or even a less guarded look were clear signs to him that he was earning his place the right way. There was no rush in his approach, only the steady certainty that what truly mattered took time, consistency, and deep respect for the other person. And so, day after day, without grand declarations or exaggerated gestures, the bond between Benjamin and Hannah quietly grew stronger. The bar, a silent witness to their evolving connection, became the stage for a relationship rooted in shared authenticity and the lightness of simple moments. Both went about their lives, perhaps still without naming what was blossoming between them, but already keenly aware that there was something rare taking shape, something worth cultivating with the same dedication Hannah poured into her daily work, and that Benjamin was now learning to invest in understanding her vastly different world. The habit of seeing Benjamin at the bar no longer felt strange to Hannah. Even though she tried to maintain her usual composure, it was impossible not to notice how his presence, over time, had shifted from an isolated event to an unexpectedly natural part of her routine. He had become a constant who, surprisingly, didn't bring any unease, but rather a quiet sense of comfort. Benjamin wasn't like the regular customers who tried to capture her attention with empty words or exaggerated gestures. His presence felt more like a steady breeze in a place otherwise ruled by unpredictable winds. The regular patrons had noticed the unusual visitors' frequency as well. Instead of provoking gossip or sideways glances, it generated a quiet acceptance, almost as if everyone understood there was something genuine happening, something that went beyond the simple coincidence of a businessman frequenting a neighborhood bar. Hannah, still protective of the boundary she carefully maintained between her personal and professional life, realized that the wall she had built was starting to show cracks. No matter how much she tried to convince herself that Benjamin was just another customer, she couldn't deny the subtle influence he had over her days. Benjamin, fully aware of how delicate that structure was, remained patient in his approach. He preferred to observe the bar's workings like someone studying a living organism, learning its rhythms and respecting its natural flow. He knew that any impulsive move could shatter the fragile harmony he had so carefully preserved. Instead, he allowed time to lay down the foundation of trust between them, letting their relationship strengthen organically. This respect didn't go unnoticed by Hannah. Little by little, began to see him not just as a constant visitor, but as someone who truly understood and valued her reality. One afternoon, chance provided an unexpected moment outside of their usual interactions. One of the bar's regular suppliers had logistical issues, leaving basic supplies unavailable. Benjamin, having overheard a conversation between Hannah and the manager, decided to step in quietly. Using his connections, he managed to resolve the situation within a few hours, without expecting any recognition or thanks. For Hannah, who was used to facing these challenges alone, the gesture was more than a practical solution. It revealed Benjamin's genuine willingness to help without asking for anything in return. That episode opened the door to conversations that went beyond the professional environment. They talked about life outside the bar, personal struggles, and even the small daily victories that, for many, might have seemed insignificant. In these moments of sharing, Hannah saw more and more of the man behind the businessman, someone carrying his own internal battles, far from the polished image of absolute success that surrounded him. Benjamin, for his part, found inspiration in Hannah's quiet strength, something that defied traditional measures of achievement and power. And so, in the steady rhythm of their lives, they continued building something solid, rooted in constant presence and the sincerity of small gestures. There was no rush or reckless promises, only the silent certainty that they were heading in the right direction. Between trays served and conversations at the end of shifts, their story unfolded, not as a modern fairy tale, but as a deeply human narrative, marked by the authenticity of two worlds that, little by little, stopped seeming so far apart. The rhythm of the days moved forward with a quiet cadence, almost imperceptible to the outside world, but for Hannah and Benjamin, each new morning seemed to carry a subtle expectation, even if unspoken. At the bar, in between tasks, Hannah began to notice how his presence was becoming more familiar, not just because of how often he came, but because of the natural way he now fit into a place that had once been entirely hers. Each encounter with Benjamin stopped feeling like a coincidence and became a comforting constant, bringing with it a quiet anticipation that warmed her day even before he walked through the door. It was during one of Hannah's rare days off that Benjamin found the opportunity to suggest something different. With the same unassuming simplicity that had always guided his approach, he proposed they spend time together outside the usual setting of the bar, away from trays, glasses, and the invisible weight of responsibilities that seemed to rest constantly on her shoulders. It wasn't a flashy invitation, nor one weighed down by hidden intentions. Rather, it was almost a humble request to share a moment somewhere they could just be themselves, without the expectations tied to their usual roles. Moved by a mixture of surprise and genuine willingness, Hannah agreed, feeling an unexpected sense of safety in taking that step. Benjamin chose a small, secluded park on the outskirts of the city, where old trees formed a welcoming canopy over dirt paths, and wildflowers peeked out between the stones with an effortless grace. There, far from the constant noise of the city center, they walked side by side, allowing themselves conversations free from the demands of everyday life. He spoke about a youth shaped by challenges the public knew little about, of sleepless nights spent carefully planning each step of his rise, and of the doubts that crept in even at the height of his success. In return, Hannah opened small windows into her own life, speaking of her full-time dedication to her mother and the postponed dreams she still quietly nurtured during lonely nights. That afternoon unfolded with a lightness neither of them had felt in a long time. Each step seemed to lift some invisible burden, and in the small exchanges of confidences, a genuine intimacy began to bloom. There was a rare authenticity in each shared smile, in every glance that spoke louder than words, as if time itself had decided to slow down to grant them that peaceful moment together. In the simplicity of their gestures, sharing a drink bought from a park vendor or laughing at some trivial observation about the local squirrels, they were building a solid bond, rooted not in empty promises, but in the sincerity of the present moment. When the afternoon drew to a close and they approached their farewell, there was no need for elaborate speeches or dramatic goodbyes. The look they exchanged said more than any declaration ever could. It was a silent confirmation that from that day forward, something between them had shifted irreversibly. Hannah felt an uncommon serenity within herself, as if, for the first time in a long while, she could allow a little hope to seep into the cracks of her daily worries. Benjamin, for his part, carried the conviction that, with her, his endless search for meaning had finally found a true echo. As the city around them resumed its usual hustle and bustle, Benjamin and Hannah held close the memory of a simple, yet deeply meaningful day. Both knew it wasn't a destination, but rather the quiet beginning of a path they would choose to walk together. And even without needing to name what was beginning to take shape between them, they could feel that every meeting from that day forward would be illuminated by that memory, serving as a quiet beacon guiding them through whatever uncertainties the future might hold. From that day in the park onward, the bar's routine never quite felt the same to Hannah. Every time Benjamin walked through the door, a quiet warmth coursed through her chest, a peaceful anticipation that contrasted with the accumulated exhaustion from her long work shifts. He had become more than just a regular presence. He was now a silent yet essential part of her daily life. Every exchange of words, every glance caught in the rush behind the counter, carried a special meaning that escaped the understanding of other patrons. But for her, it resonated like a familiar and comforting melody. Benjamin, for his part, maintained his careful approach, fully aware of how important it was to respect the natural pace at which their relationship was unfolding. There was no rush in his actions, no grand gestures that might feel like an attempt to accelerate a process that, if it were to be real, needed to blossom at its own rhythm. Instead, he focused on the small things, a thoughtful comment about how tired she looked after a busy night, a discreet smile when he saw her efficiently solve an unexpected problem, or even a simple question about the bar's day-to-day operations that showed his genuine interest in her world. It was during an early spring afternoon that Benjamin, knowing Hannah's love for simple, authentic activities, suggested they visit a local farmer's market together. The proposal came with the same easygoing tone that marked their interactions, free of hidden expectations or ulterior motives. Hannah, after a brief moment of surprise, felt inclined to accept. The invitation offered a well-deserved break from her exhausting routine, and the chance to enjoy a relaxed moment by Benjamin's side seemed not only tempting, but truly welcome. The visit to the market turned out to be a delightful experience for both of them. Amid stalls bursting with fresh fruit, artisanal cheeses, and vibrant flowers, Benjamin and Hannah shared spontaneous laughter and light-hearted comments about the quirky details of local products. Benjamin displayed a genuine curiosity about everything he saw, asking sincere questions to the vendors and appreciating each item with a renewed sense of wonder. Hannah, familiar with that environment, felt at ease guiding Benjamin through the stands, showing him her favorite vendors and sharing little stories about each one. As they walked together, the natural ease between them became increasingly evident. There was no need for grand declarations or carefully crafted gestures. Their connection showed itself through the effortless flow of their conversations, the easy exchange of glances, and the spontaneity of their shared smiles. Both felt, with growing clarity, that they were building something that went beyond the circumstances that had initially brought them together, something far greater than a mere chance meeting between a hardworking waitress and a billionaire accustomed to the grand stages of the corporate elite. By the end of their outing, when they said goodbye with a simple handshake that, for them, held more emotion than any hug could have, they both knew they had taken another decisive step toward a shared future. There was no need to verbalize their intentions. It was written clearly in their gestures and their eyes. The story they were writing together gained new layers of meaning and hope with each passing day. And as each returned to their daily routine, they carried with them the quiet certainty that, no matter what lay ahead, the connection they had built was destined to keep growing stronger. The weeks following their visit to the farmers' market solidified what had once been just a quiet attraction, transforming it into a full and undeniable bond. Hannah, who had always taken pride in keeping her life free from sentimental distractions, now realized that Benjamin had become an inseparable part of her daily thoughts. There was no longer any denying the calm she felt whenever she saw him approaching the counter, or the warmth that filled her chest during the brief pauses when they exchanged quick words between tasks. He was no longer just a regular customer. He had become someone who was woven into her story as naturally as the air she breathed. Benjamin, for his part, found in Hannah an anchor he had never imagined he needed. Far from the endless meetings and massive contracts that filled his schedule, he discovered in her a space where his true self could simply exist without masks or external demands. Whenever he stepped away from the bar to attend to the duties of his corporate empire, he noticed his mind inevitably drifting back to her, yearning for their next encounter. Hannah wasn't just a comforting presence. She was the embodiment of the authenticity he had secretly searched for all his life. Determined to deepen their connection, Benjamin suggested that Hannah visit an old property he had recently acquired on the outskirts of the city, where he planned to establish his personal vineyard. His proposal carried no intention of impressing her with displays of power or luxury. It was, above all, an opportunity to share with her an intimate project, something that connected him to his roots and his deepest values. Hannah, after a brief hesitation driven by the natural caution of someone who had learned to choose wisely, agreed, drawn by a genuine curiosity and a growing trust in Benjamin. When they arrived at the property, Hannah was enchanted not by its grandeur, but by the serenity that it exuded. The budding vineyards, the weathered stone buildings, and the fresh scent of vegetation created a rare sense of peace. Benjamin led her across the land with a quiet enthusiasm, passionately describing his plans to transform the place into a venture that would honor the traditions of the land while embracing innovation to secure a prosperous future. But more than that, he shared his vision of creating a personal refuge there, a place where life could be lived authentically, far from the suffocating pressures of the corporate world. As they walked together under the open sky, exchanging ideas and confidences, the distance between them shrank, not just physically, but emotionally too. Every word spoken and every smile shared cemented the growing certainty that they were building something real. When it came time to say goodbye, Benjamin held Hannah's hand with a tenderness and strength that conveyed more than any words could. And in that touch, More eloquent than any declaration, they both recognized that their once separate paths were now irreversibly intertwined. The echo of that visit to the property continued to resonate within Hannah like a soft melody that lingered, even during the busiest moments of her daily routine. Back at the bar, her days resumed their familiar rhythm, but something inside her had changed profoundly. She felt enveloped by a rare sense of calm, as if life had suddenly found a new axis. Benjamin was no longer just a figure who occasionally appeared on her horizon, but rather a constant presence, a companion who gave meaning to every daily task, a silent motivation that pulsed within her and transformed even the most exhausting obligations into moments filled with significance. Benjamin, in turn, was becoming increasingly aware of the value of the bond he was building with Hannah. Within her, he saw a quiet strength, a firmness in her actions that made him admire not just the resilient woman who managed the bar with determination, but also the authentic person who refused to be dazzled by the superficial glitter that often surrounded his public life. Their conversations, once sparked by initial curiosity, were now genuine dialogues where they shared ambitions, vulnerabilities, and even fears they would never admit to others. These sincere exchanges brought them closer than any grand gesture ever could. It was during one of those conversations, on a peaceful late afternoon, that Benjamin, with his characteristic naturalness, decided to open his heart even more candidly. Without relying on rehearsed speeches or empty promises, he spoke directly about his feelings, expressing a genuine desire to be by Hannah's side completely, not just as someone who admired her strength from afar, but as a true partner in every nuance of life. His words were chosen with honesty, carrying the transparency of someone who valued not appearances, but the essence of what truly mattered. Hannah listened carefully to every word, feeling a powerful emotion well up inside her chest. Allowing herself to be vulnerable wasn't something she did easily, but faced with Benjamin's sincerity, there was no room for unnecessary defenses. She recognized in him not the distant magnate seen in the news, but a man willing to shed the armor of success to build something real, rooted in mutual understanding and patient respect for her own pace. She realized that, with him, she didn't have to sacrifice her identity, because he saw her fully, with all her strengths and flaws, and still chose to stay. Without giving in to illusions or exaggerated fantasies, Hannah responded not with flowery promises, but with the same authenticity that had always guided her actions. With calm conviction, she said she would walk alongside him, seeing in his proposal more than just pretty words. She saw a concrete possibility of true partnership. She added that, even knowing life's uncertainties, she believed they could face whatever came their way together, because she had found in Benjamin not just a passionate man, but an ally ready to build, brick by brick, a solid and honest future by her side. As the city around them continued its hurried routine, Benjamin and Hannah, in the serenity of their gestures and the depth of their conversations, consolidated the certainty that they had found something rare. It wasn't a fleeting passion that would vanish with the first breeze of hardship, but a strong, deep-rooted feeling born of true understanding and a mutual desire to grow together. There, in the simplicity of that encounter, they sealed without ceremony a silent but unbreakable commitment to face life's challenges side by side, confident that the authenticity of their bond would always be their greatest strength. As the days accumulated over the memories they had built together, the relationship between Benjamin and Hannah shifted from a promise to a living reality, present in every daily gesture. The bar, once just a backdrop for casual encounters, now became a place filled with personal meaning. For Hannah, every corner of that space carried memories of the small moments that had woven her story with Benjamin. A smile exchanged in the rush of service, an attentive look as she solved a problem, or the simple joy of seeing him walk through the door, as if the day only truly began with his presence. Hannah, true to her independence, remained steadfast in her commitment not to lose herself in the tide of emotions their relationship brought. But with each passing day, it became increasingly clear that he was not a fleeting distraction, but a partner who added to her strength without ever overshadowing it. She saw in Benjamin a man who didn't try to change her essence, but respected her autonomy and, more than that, admired her for it. She felt that, by his side, she remained fully Hannah Morgan, the woman who had built her own path and who now chose to share it, not out of necessity, but from true desire. Benjamin, equally transformed, found in Hannah not just inspiration, but a renewed sense of purpose. The business achievements that had once filled his ambitions no longer sparked the same light in his eyes. What now fueled his energy and motivation was the idea of building, alongside her, a future that transcended numbers and figures. It was in that spirit that he decided to share with Hannah his plans to transform the property he had shown her into something much more than a simple investment project. He wanted to create a vineyard that not only honored the land's traditions, but also celebrated the story that had brought them together. When he presented the idea to her, Benjamin spoke with genuine enthusiasm, describing how he envisioned Crawford Estate not just as a prestigious winery, but as a home for the two of them, a place where they could plant deep roots. Listening to every detail, Hannah felt deeply moved by the sincerity of his project. He wasn't trying to impress her with figures or empty promises. He was opening his world to her, sharing his dreams authentically. Without hesitation, she offered her own suggestions, practical ideas about cultivation and local events, knowing that Benjamin valued her input not out of politeness, but out of true respect for her vision. That spontaneous collaboration between them turned out to be more than productive. It was symbolic. It represented the consolidation of a bond built on reciprocity and the joint construction of a future. As they discussed details about harvests, festivals, and community partnerships, Benjamin and Hannah were not merely planning a business venture. They were, in truth, weaving the foundations of a shared life, where every decision made together reinforced the strength of the relationship they cherished so deeply. That late afternoon, as they wrapped up their conversation with a knowing smile, they both understood they had crossed another milestone in their story. It was no longer just a growing affinity or an inevitable attraction. It was a silent but deeply rooted commitment to walk life's paths together. The certainty they carried in their eyes needed no theatrical declarations to be understood. It was clear in their gestures, in their simple words, and above all, in the unshakable trust that bound them together. On a morning softer than the ones before it, Hannah woke up with a clear feeling that her life had changed for good. The feeling that had once timidly slipped through the cracks of her routine was now a solid foundation, firmly rooted at the center of her heart. It wasn't a fleeting infatuation or the illusion of something new. It was a quiet clarity that by Benjamin's side, every challenge seemed less daunting and every dream more within reach. He had become part of her life, not as an escape from reality, but as the very extension of the life she had always wished to build. As she prepared the bar for another day's work, she was caught off guard by an invitation that carried the weight of a new chapter. Benjamin, always discreet, proposed that they end the day together with another visit to Crawford Estate. It wasn't just any outing, nor was it a staged gesture meant to impress. It was, above all, an invitation to share a vision of the future, a shared glance toward the horizon they were beginning to shape with growing clarity. Without hesitation, Hannah agreed, feeling deep inside that this visit would be more than symbolic. It would be a true turning point. When they arrived at the property, the scene wrapped around them with a serenity that felt almost tangible. The vibrant green of the young vines, the fresh scent of wildflowers, and the welcoming stillness of the place created a landscape that seemed drawn especially for them. Benjamin guided her across the land with a quiet sparkle in his eye, sharing not just technical details about the project, but most importantly, his intention to turn that space into a true home, a refuge where they could fully live out their choices and affections. His words, free of embellishment, went straight to Hannah's heart. She could see in his eyes the sincerity of a man who had learned to value what truly mattered. She felt deeply that all the sacrifices and battles she had faced over the years had prepared her for this very moment. When Benjamin, with a simple and spontaneous gesture, laced his fingers through hers, no words were necessary. That touch carried the weight of all the silent promises they had exchanged since the beginning of their journey together. Benjamin's words came naturally, almost like the inevitable echo of what had already been written between them. He spoke of his genuine desire to share not only the fruits of the vineyard, but every detail of life alongside her, from bright mornings to the unexpected challenges that would arise along the way. He expressed that, above all, he wasn't looking for a companion to decorate his path to success, but for a true partner, someone with whom he could build a solid future, rooted in mutual respect and the authenticity that had always defined their bond. With her heart tight from emotion, Hannah responded with the quiet strength that had always defined her. She said she accepted, not as someone surrendering to a fantasy, but as someone who recognized, fully aware, that she had found the person she wanted to share every step of the journey with. She saw in that invitation not just a proposal for a shared life, but the realization of a dream she had long kept guarded within herself, silent and discreet like so many other aspirations she had learned to protect. Together, they walked across the property, mapping out plans not just for the business that would flourish there, but for the life they dreamed of building side by side. They spoke of future harvests, of community celebrations, and of how that place could become a vibrant home full of experiences and memories. Every idea they exchanged, every smile they shared, sealed the conviction that what they were building together was more than a project. It was a legacy of love, partnership, and authenticity. At the end of the day, as they left Crawford Estate under the golden light of the sunset, Benjamin and Hannah carried with them the unshakable certainty that the future they longed for would be built not by chance, but by the daily choice to nurture, with dedication and truth, the deep feeling that bound them. They didn't need final words. It was all there, etched into their hearts. A love story born from the unexpected, matured through the constancy of the days, and blossomed in the authenticity of two souls who had finally found their home in one another. The end. What did you think of this story? Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. See you next time.